everything is A-OK. Let God be the rock in your life, to push past any strife in your life, to dodge anything that seems to be misleading. Believe me, living this life, it ain't easy. Speaking about the truth of my Lord, of course he freed me. I won't have to walk on my own, and so believe it. Scrap with the armor of God, it's so intriguing. Try my best to stay in this word, cause it's what feeds me. A lot of people doing too much, but take it easy. Acknowledge that we doing for Christ, Jehovah Nissi. Boasting about the love of my God, he never leaves me. Understand that hurt in your life is just a season. When you feeling lost in this world, he got the meaning. Live for the truth of his words, it's all we need. Satan always telling them lies, he's so deceiving. So walk with the power of God, the Prince of Peace he is. Say when you rockin' with God, you know it's okay. Say when you rockin' with God, you know it's okay. Say when you rockin' with God, you know it's okay. Say when you rockin' with God, you know it's. See, God to give you power when your spirit is weak. No power in man's logic, through the word you should seek. How you gon' jeopardize the very thing that's keeping us free? When we gon' realize the truth that God is all that we need. Life's a temporary assignment, start reserving your seats. This world will jam you up, don't let them knock you release. Go on, give it to Christ, cause you don't wanna die in the heat. That eternal fire, the only one to say you Messiah. When you feeling weak, just try to reach a little bit higher. Jehovah Jireh, the truth, of course my soul's provided. Don't let the world tell you different, man, see Satan a liar. And make sure you standing firm, cause he willing to try it. Don't put your soul on the shelf, you know he willing to buy it. It's only a matter of time before he get in your mind. It's just something to keep in mind, going through trying times. Remember everything is okay, so stay on the grind, get it. Say when you rockin' with God, you know it's okay. Say when you rockin' with God, you know it's okay. Say when you rockin' with God, you know it's okay. Say when you rockin' with God, you know it's. See, we've been down for too long, now it's time to get up. Feeling empty inside, God will fill you up. Living in this world, we seem to have it all mixed up. As if God is not our provider, take a look in your cup. See, everything is okay, if you know what I mean. We say our faith go hard, but we ain't trusting in he. So we spread all the doubt around like a disease. We gotta trust in Messiah, cause our Father is he. The truth and the light, the abundant Father, Jesus Christ. Hacking dead in this world when God is breathing with life. Gotta be strapped with this armor, are you ready to fight? Full force against Satan, he about to go night-night. So wake up and allow God to be the driver in front. He will provide you what you need, so you don't have to want. Real recognize, real see it's never a game. Of course it's all because it's grace that we even got it made. Holla, say when you rockin' with God, you know it's okay. Say when you rockin' with God, you know it's okay. Say when you rockin' with God, you know it's okay. Say when you rockin' with God, you know it's okay. Okay, okay.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Faith Ministries Church. I'm Ashley.
And I am Salon.
And we welcome you to Say Something, Do Something.
Yes, this is our second night of this online forum discussing issues of race, faith, and action. And hopefully many of you were with us last night. We had a really good start to our conversation. Yesterday was about saying something and giving us an opportunity to take a moment to process so much that's going on around us, to have a chance to get out exactly what we're feeling, express some of those things, and hopefully get to a place of peace, so that we'll be in position to do what we intend to do today, which is discuss some action steps that we can take to actually do something.
Exactly.
Yes. And we also encourage you, as always, to help us broaden this discussion by sharing. Now, I know it sounds like a broken record, but it really does make a difference, because when you share, for those of you who are on Facebook, when you share this video, it goes out to your friends, to those who you socialize on social media. And that is one way for you to do one small thing that can help broaden this conversation, hopefully get more voices involved, allow us to hear from more perspectives, and make a bigger impact and a bigger change.
Exactly.
Yes. And we see that some people are already online.
Yeah, so we want to say good evening to everyone. Thank you to Pastor Howard Washington. I see him watching online. Catherine, Evie, I see, there's Gail. There's
yes.
Sharon Anderson.
Tina, I believe it's your birthday.
Oh,
Happy
and
birthday,
I see Jenny
Tina.
again from last evening. She was one of our guests
on
last night. Thanks, Jenny.
Jeanette Lee. I mean, it's so many.
A lot of folks.
Yes.
Yes, this is awesome.
And also, real quick before we move on, prepare some questions.
Yes.
So this is an interactive experience. So if you see a panel member who has a line of expertise that you'd like to question or to get some of their perspective on directly, feel free to use that chat box and we'll try to get to as many of your questions and comments as possible.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think we've talked enough.
Yes. Let's head on over to Dr. and Dr. Wise house and check in on them as well.
Well, here we are. Glad to see us.
Uh-oh. To the right. There it is. To the right.
Hi, guys. How are you?
Say something, do something, like get in the camera. Oh boy, we're so happy to have everybody who's watching today, and we're extremely happy to get in the same picture for the first time. We had a great start on last night. What I was thinking, this is sort of like a civil rights revival. You know how we have a 2-night revival and we preach? Well, we have 2 nights and we're not talking about preaching, but we're certainly talking about things that are important that we need to do. And I'm hoping with the group of people that we have tonight that we can ask them. All of them are people who have attained various levels of achievement and accomplishment in our society. But I wish they would tell us about some of their personal experiences with racism, because a lot of times we think that because they're this, that, and this, that they don't experience it. So if they can tell us that, that'll be helpful. And then another thing that I would like for each of them to tell us is from where they sit, from what they do, not only how they experience racism, but how can they help to change some of our racism in our society, and then how can we help them to do that? Because another thing that I think that people don't really realize is that when especially when African Americans get to certain levels of achievement, we think that, oh, as soon as you just get a black person in that position, they'll be able to push a button and change everything. It doesn't happen like that. And many of these people who we'll be talking to with tonight, I'm sure are in places where there are things that they wish they could do, but they can't do because they're handcuffed by structures and restrictions and so forth. So I'd be interested to hear what some of those things are, and then what they can say to us in terms of what we can do as just regular people to change our situation. What do you think?
I agree.
That's good. Oh boy.
Yes. Well,
that's easy.
Hey, there you go. I think it's time for us to get to work. Let's get to work to doing something.
Yes. We're not just about saying something, but we are about doing something. We have a wonderful panel of guests this evening, just so you know, who is on our list. We are looking forward to hearing from Commissioner Kevin Boyce. We're looking forward to hearing from Judge Beatty Blunt, Councilman Mitchel Brown, Chief Kimberly Spears McNatt, and Pastor Timothy Ahrens. So it's a very wonderful, diverse panel, and we're looking forward to getting into it. And we'll do that right after this video.
It's been said that talk is cheap. And for those in power, that seems to be the case. Because we hear what they're saying, but what are they actually doing? To our elected officials, we hear you saying,
they're a bunch of racists. There was, James O. Easton, Mississippi, Strom Thurmond, and so on. There were 9 guys who were in the caucus that were, I ran against in the civil rights movement.
But what are you doing?
But he did not say that Eastland and others were partners on several of Biden's anti-busing bills.
There was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me.
We hear what you're saying.
I am your president of law and order and an ally of all peaceful protesters.
But what are you doing?
The administration asked police to clear peaceful protesters from the park across the White House so the president could stage a photo op.
Saying,
racism is evil, and those who cause violence in its name are criminals and thugs.
doing.
Protesters facing off against authorities, kneeling and raising their hands in peaceful demonstration. But then, almost suddenly, U.S. Park and Secret Service police began shoving and hitting.
Oh! Whoa!
And as police move in, they fire tear gas on the crowd.
So it seems those who speak up against the system of oppression have to pay an awful price. But for those in power, talk is cheap. It's not just in Washington. The same hypocritical dichotomy between saying and doing is evident in every state, city, and county. So once again, it's up to us. It's up to us to begin the work of aligning what we say with what we do. It's up to us to unite, organize, and take action, resulting in meaningful change. It's up to us to say something and do something. As we hold our elected officials accountable to their words, we must also hold ourselves accountable to ours. So I ask you, I hear what you're saying, but what are you doing?
All right, everybody. Well, our first guest that we have this evening is Kevin Boyce. He's here's a little info in his bio. He's elected as our Franklin County Commissioner in 2016. Boyce brings experience as a state representative, state treasurer, and Columbus City Council member. In addition to public service, he's worked with nonprofit and corporate businesses, and he has won many awards. And we're so excited to have you here. Mr. Boyce, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. What a great video when you were playing the music. I actually liked the music playing during my introduction. So if you could redo it and play the music, I'd like that introduction.
Yeah, that's your hype video,
right.
Your walk-in music.
Right, that was my hype video. It was perfect. It was well done. Well done. Can you guys see me well? I feel like I'm on half a screen. Is that okay? Or
You
should I move
are.
over?
We're having a problem tonight with half
Yeah,
screen.
more to your right.
To your right. There you go.
Am I right?
There you go.
There you go.
That's
All
it.
right there. I gotta just stay still. It's not comfortable, but I'm gonna stay like this.
Okay.
First of all, let me say thank you for what you are doing to convene a conversation. Part of the road that we are trotting right now has to do with acceptance of the facts and the reality that we as African Americans far too long. 2020 has presented us with a global pandemic that has really changed our lives. But the fact is that Black people were dealing with the pandemic even before the pandemic. We were dealing with racism as a pandemic. And, while George Floyd and Eric Garner and Trayvon Martin and so many others for that matter, while their deaths are tragic, I think the silver lining is that they have really exposed what we've all known has existed for a long time, and that's the need for change now. And so the folks who are protesting, I think I want to encourage them to protest, but I want to encourage them to do it in a peaceful and nonviolent way. It's so critical that our message not be lost under the catalyst of destruction and violence and those kinds of things. It's a distraction to the real issue at hand, and it's something that I want to encourage people to really not be a part of. We just can't do that. As you all probably know by now, if you don't mind, and good to see you, Dr. and First Lady Wise, you look absolutely fabulous. Look, I promise you, y'all don't age. I promise you. I've been in politics for 20 years. Y'all look the same today that y'all looked when I first started. Dr. Wise, you might have a little bit less hair because you used to wear your hair like the sun.
I just got a haircut. That's why.
But let me just say, if I could, let me tell you about what happened on Saturday. And most of you probably read the news and saw how myself, Congresswoman Beatty, and President Shannon Hardin were down with the protesters and ended up getting pepper sprayed. And someone asked me, well, did they know it was you? Did they know it was? I said, well, I don't know if they recognized me or not, But what might have gave it away was the shirt that I had on that said Kevin Boyce, County Commissioner, with a big seal on it. That might have gave it away. But so I think they did know who we were. But more than that, I think there was a disregard for no matter who you are. They were aggressive. They were what I would say almost a bully and igniting tactic, and it was unfortunate and unnecessary. So let me back up. So myself, President Hardin. So let me back up a little bit more. Part of the local unrest centered on a young man that was arrested on the east side of Columbus. I won't get into the details, but this young man was protesting the death of George Floyd by himself. He had a sign that read, "F the police," and he had a sidearm, a gun on his side. Now, he also possesses a license to carry a gun and has a license to carry a concealed weapon, by the way. Nonetheless, the police showed up on the scene, words took place, and then a scuffle took place between he and the police officers. Nonetheless, he was arrested and locked up. And many people begin to question, for all the people who were protesting and walking around with guns downtown just a couple of weeks before, who looked different, by the way, looked different than brown-skinned folks and dark-skinned folks. They were protesting, if you recall, the reopening of Ohio. They were protesting the governor, and they were, banging on the state house and doing all those kind of things. Remember, they showed up at Dr. Acton's house and all of that. And none of them were arrested, not a one of them. This young man goes out and he protests, and he has a right to freedom of speech too, and he's arrested. So myself, Congresswoman Beatty, and President Hardin were working with the family and some folks in the community to get him out of jail. It really fell upon me because he was in the county jail and he was being charged with a felony, being charged with assault on a police officer. And so I was working closely with Ron O'Brien. And so at 7 a.m. on that Saturday, we had gotten on a call because I was on the phone earlier with Ron O'Brien and the sheriff and others. And then Shannon and Joyce and myself got on the phone just to reconcile our own conversation about where things were at. Long story short, at the end of the conversation, we decided that we felt that it would be a very positive public message for us to go and stand with the protesters and encourage them to do it in a peaceful and nonviolent way. So we decided to meet at City Hall and we'd walk over together, the three of us. And so we did that. We went over and people were greeting us. It was a very friendly atmosphere. I'd say it was 50% white, 50% black. And it was very much folks protesting and calling out names of victims and really just utilizing their First Amendment right. And the crowd was growing, and it was growing fast. And I mean, when I say growing fast, I mean it was growing by the second. And and so the police showed up, and their goal was to keep people out of the street and on the sidewalks. Well, I mean, with so many people, you're just going to, if there's so many people, there's only so much room on the sidewalk. Eventually, it's going to spill out to the street, and that's what started to happen. But these officers were so aggressive. They were with their bikes. They had their bicycles, and they would push people back with their bikes and just kind of shove them. And we would say, me, Joyce, and Shannon, we'd say, "Hey, everybody!" We talk to them. "Hey, back up. Let's cooperate. Let's do the right thing." And folks would comply. And then there was this scenario where there was a young lady who was clearly agitated, and there was an officer who was kind of parked right in front of her on his bike, and she was yelling at him. And I would just say that then it turned physical. And I will say she was not the initiator of that physicality. And, both Joyce and I, who were standing right there, Joyce reacted and said, her first words were, "You are wrong, sir. You are wrong." And, by then the police just came over and they didn't think, they didn't talk. They just sprayed the crowd. And, and then and I grabbed Congresswoman Beatty and I grabbed, I'm not trying to sound like I hear anything, but it was in the midst of thing where I'm just trying to find my partners here and get, we're trying to get to safety. And I didn't get this hit as bad as they did. They took direct hits of pepper spray. I got hit, but not like they did. And so I was able to see a little more and grab them. I'm saying all this to say, though, is not a day goes by, Dr. Wise, that I'm not reminded that I'm a black man in America. And it's time that we begin to start a new chapter in America. And, I reminded a reporter today that our country was founded upon protests. I mean, think about the Boston Tea Party and the very crux to which the United States of America exists today was started from a protest. And the protest turned quite violent and quite extensive. But it changed a nation and created a country, essentially. And so, the silver lining and the tragic deaths of these people that didn't have to die, the silver lining is that we all have an even deeper obligation to fight to ensure that their deaths were not in vain. And, I have a friend of mine who told me he was so discouraged and he felt that racism will never end in our lifetime. And I said, well, tell that to your ancestor slaves who, if you could go back in time and sit with them and say, do you know 150 years from now, there'll be a black president of the United States? They wouldn't believe you. They wouldn't have taken you seriously. Tell that to the folks who were marching in the civil rights era in the 50s and 60s. If the changes and the progressions that we live with and enjoy today, tell that to them. I often say in Franklin County, the last thing I'll say, and maybe you have questions for me, but in Franklin County, you think about it, we had a black president of the United States of America before we had our first black county commissioner. What does that say about the community that we live in? We still have a lot of ways to go, but it requires our deep commitment. It requires the churches and our corporate citizens. It requires everyday people to do their part to change this narrative, to change the landscape. And so I think what you're seeing is a response into what people have known for a long time, but that technology has just exposed. Now there's a cell phone. Every 5-year-old has a cell phone with a camera phone on it. And so, technology has really exposed what we know has existed for a long time. And we've got to change that culture. I think the city has, we were pushing for civilian review boards and all of those things back in when I was on city council, when I first started. It's why the FOP has never endorsed me. Nonetheless, the atmosphere and the climate to get it done exists more today than it did then. And so I'm very hopeful and excited that we can move the needle in this conversation. And the reality is that you can't legislate morality. Change has to come because people demand change, people want change, and people invest in what it takes for change to occur. And so I really think that we're at the very beginning of a movement and change. Franklin County was one of the first, if not the first county in the nation to declare racism as a public health crisis. And since then, I've had no less than 100 calls from around the country asking for a copy of our resolution. City Council adopted it. The mayor has adopted it. Other municipalities are adopting it. And more than just a resolution is the idea that we are stating publicly that we are going to invest and in this conversation and take action. And I'm so grateful that the city is a part of this. And I think we're at the very beginning of real change. And it's not going to be overnight, and it's not going to be without a lot more pain. Nonetheless, I believe that the pathway is there. It's like on the Wiz, the yellow brick road. I can see, I see it over there now. We just got to get to it and travel down. And while things are going to happen, things are going to be good, things are going to be bad. We're trying to get to that final place where that place that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. dreamed about, and so many others have fought, died, and worked for. So I'm happy to be here. I'm grateful for the conversation, and more importantly, grateful for the community involvement that we have here in Central Ohio.
Can I thank you for coming and responding so quickly? One of the questions that we see here on our comments is, how can you use your position to help make a difference in the lives of African Americans? And coupled with that, can you tick off 2-3 things that are signs of racism in our county, in our city, in our state?
Oh man, that's a loaded question, but let me try to answer best I can. So I'm a business person away from politics. People don't know I'm an investment banker. away from politics. And, I would try to call on the county too. I'd try to call and get business and do business, and you could barely get to the door. And I was, quote unquote, a name brand. I can get the meeting, but getting the business was a whole nother thing. And the county just historically did not have the accommodation to try to get diverse vendors, to try to be inclusive with women and minorities and others. And so I believe we've turned the dial on that. And I can't take exclusive credit for that. My colleagues, John O'Grady and Marilyn Brown, have been as active and as supportive of these conversations as I've been and putting them in. So we've implemented things like we set goals to how we want to perform. We're building a new jail. Unfortunately, that's a thing that comes with our growth size in Central Ohio. A county is 1.4 million people now. And so we're just about grown a lot of our facilities. So we're building a new jail, and we'll have nearly 30% of all of the contract work. And that, by the way, that's the largest project that Franklin County has ever done, a $500 million endeavor. 30% of that will have been done by minority contractors, so that's real change. So you ask what we can do things like we can embrace in our own work in inclusion and diversity. We can lead by example. We can change what's long been a door not open for business. We can hang up a shingle that says we are open for business to everybody. And so if you're ready to present a good product and a good work product, you can do work with Franklin County, and that's changed. We're getting numbers that show we've done a tremendous job of opening up those doors, and so that's what we can do. Signs that it still exists, they're all around us. When you've got a congresswoman, the president of council, which, by the way, those police work for him. He's their boss in many ways. And the mayor and the president much run the city, and so they sprayed him. And he took a real hard hit. They didn't care. And so I think that's a sign that, while we are name brand people, if you will, I can't think of another kind of way to describe it, but while we're name brand people, it shouldn't matter. It shouldn't matter. We're just people. We're there. And, and I think the disregard was unbelievable. I don't know if you saw the photo in the Dispatch of me grabbing Joyce Beatty and Shannon, and we're kind of getting out of the melee. But there's a woman, a Caucasian woman, who fell to the ground, and the officer is standing there spraying the girl while she's on the ground, spraying her in the face with the mace. It's unbelievable. Pastor, I'm going to text you the picture just so you can see it here, so you can see it up close person, because I zoomed in on it, and you just look at his face, and you can see a disregard. And while she was Caucasian, I think in the midst of things, they didn't really know, and part of their support for the racism conversation, I think to them at that moment, everybody was black, and they were, and I do believe that there are racist cultures embedded in law enforcement. It's a fact. African American men make up 6% of the population, but over 40% of our prisoners around the country. I mean, you tell me something is wrong with our system, and it is rooted in racism. And that's why we made our declaration of racism as a public health crisis. And we embedded in that is our investment in that work and our investment in that change. The one thing I will say, you asked what we're doing, and I'll close on this. What are we doing? We studied poverty and what are the main causes of poverty. We spent a year really looking at this work. And out of it, one of the great things that came out of it is the creation of what we were referring to as an innovation hub. The innovation hub is where we are going to seed, vet, and pilot big ideas in racism reduction and poverty reduction. And so if the church has an idea, or you, Pastor, have an idea, or if anyone has an idea, you can come to this innovation hub, present it, we'll fund it, we'll help you develop it, fund it, pilot it, and if it works, we'll replicate it and bring it to scale. We're looking for, and everything goes. I tell people, come with the biggest ideas. You can say, look, I think everybody should get, a car, and here's why. Because, people getting to and from work and getting to and from the doctor, getting to and from the grocery store, I don't know, make the case, but let's try it. Let's see, let's see if this can really move the dial, move the needle. And so the Innovation Hub, the county has committed $2.5 million a year for the next 10 years to this project. So that's $25 million. We're raising money from the private sector to match that. We're asking the state to join in with us on that. And we think it's going to allow for some of the ideas to be generated from the community and from other leaders, rather than working in the ivory tower, trying to decide what these neighborhoods need or what these people need. And then, it never works.
That's awesome. Commissioner Boyce, I have a question from Natasha from Houston. She says, after all the rallies, the protests, and the looting, how do we execute a real agenda or plan of action to take monumental change?
Well, we have their attention, and we have America's attention. And so I think now it's time to do the work. What I've learned in my time in politics over the years is it's great to go out to community events, and it's great to wave and shake hands and kiss babies, but there comes a time to do the work. And that is where you roll up your sleeves, and it's painstakingly, it's knuckle grinding, it's real hard commitment. And so now here's a time where we take ideas and we try to vet them in ways to really evaluate what are the things that will help us reduce racism. How can we really approach this? And here's the reality. There is no silver bullet. There's no magic wand or button that we can push and it all goes away. It's going to take a lifetime to peel back the layers. You think about this country condoned and supported slavery or elements of it for 400 years. And we've only been out of that where it can officially be done for about 160 years, a little less than 160 years. So the elements of those cultures still are deeply embedded in our everyday society. And so peeling those back are going to take some time. But now's the time for your ideas. Now's the time for your own sort of illustration and demonstration of ways that we can do this. And it really starts with individuals, ways that we can reduce racism, ways that we can reduce poverty and other inequities that have plagued American society since the beginning of time.
I have just one last comment, and I just an observation, and that is talking about symbols. So it is great that you have been able to help negotiate 30% contractors in the building of the prison, but it is ironic that the affordable housing project is a $500 million prison, as opposed to housing, as opposed to doing things to keep people from imprisonment. And I realize that these are some of the things that you kind of have to fight within the system to get the best you can get. And that is a good thing. But we're hoping for the day where we won't have to spend $500 million to imprison people, but we can spend $500 million for people to have their own homes, for people to develop more equity and things like that. I just had to make that observation because couldn't let that one pass.
You know what? I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I honestly used to say when I first started as a commissioner, it's hard to be out there talking about building a jail, and I got so many arguments that I can make against that, let alone spending $500 million on it. And so I think I see Laurel Beatty Blunt says she's going to address the comment about prison good. She's awesome, by the way. I'm gonna stick around and listen to her too. But you're right. We've got to. I think those resources would be far better spent. I can think of 10 ways they can be far better spent than a correctional facility. The one sad part is that unfortunately, in a growing county like Franklin County, there are both legal requirements that we have with the Ohio Revised Code and other things that tend to get us in trouble because of the size. I mean, we wanted to take the prison from just a warehouse of an incarceration to a place where we can triage issues and really address why people are there. If you're there and you need mental health service, we can triage you to mental health services. If you're there and you need health care, something to be addressed, then we can triage you to that. And the idea is to not keep you there, but to get you what you need so that you you don't end up there, and we can keep the people that need to be there, because they're a danger to society or to themselves, then we can address that this way. So the new prison, there are some positives that will go into it, but I couldn't agree with you more. I would love to have spent that money on affordable housing or job creation or economic development, or I can just go down the list. And so I think you're right. It's a sad tale of the growth of a county, and it's always a tale of two cities kind of a story.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much, Commissioner Boyce, for your voice, for your service, and for taking time to chat with us a little bit. And you really did segue wonderfully to our next panel member, Judge Laurel Beatty Blunt. So thank you for your time, sir.
Yes,
Can I stick around her? I feel like you're kicking me off the car. Is there, can I speak to the judge for a second? Because
now you're just the voice. Bring out the judge.
Right. All right, I'm gonna stick around with her then. Good to see you guys. You all look great. Thanks for having me.
All right. And you and anybody else can watch on Facebook, on YouTube, or at faithministries.church/watch.
Yes.
So we appreciate
And we
that.
see there were a couple of other questions, but for the sake of time, we wanted to keep needing to roll along, but we'll hopefully have the opportunity to ask him that, and we can get those answers to you.
Right. And some of those questions that we couldn't get to Commissioner Boyce, we have Councilman Brown, who's coming up as well. So stick with us. But for now, we are going to keep on rolling and introduce our next guest, who is Judge Laurel Beatty Blunt. So everybody welcome her. As we're bringing her in, I'll just give a little quick synopsis and quick bio here. She's a graduate of Spelman University and Vanderbilt University Law School. She began her legal career in 1999, and she has served as a counselor for the Ohio Secretary of State. She was appointed to the Franklin County Court of Common Pleas in 2009 and is currently a member of the Supreme Court of Ohio Board on Continuing Legal Education. Won several awards, very much, very highly respected and thought of, and we're glad that you are with us today, Judge.
Thank you so much. First of all, I thank you all so much for even having this. It is so important right now that everyone in our community is involved and engaged. The other thing that I want to share with you all is how proud I am of the Black leadership in our city. I cannot tell you the leadership that Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, Commissioner Kevin Boyce, Council President Shannon Hardin, Stephanie Hightower from the Urban League, Christy Angel from the YWCA, and Nana Watson from the NAACP have all come together and exhibited amazing leadership. And I am, it's so exciting to watch, and it's so exciting to be a part of that. So I just want to point out how lucky we are in Columbus to have Black leaders that are actually engaged and doing something. So to your first question, Dr. Wise, about racism, I would like to share two things, actually. I have two kids. One, Spencer is 5 and Leah will be 7 on Sunday. And how racism showed up and just kind of hit me in the head with a brick was regarding school choice. I was speaking with a neighbor, and we live in Gahanna, and she was really not understanding why we chose not to send our children to Gahanna schools. And it was because when we went to visit the elementary school for which we are zoned, there was hardly any Black kids. When we looked at 3 kindergarten classes, of those 3 kindergarten classes, there was only 1 little Black girl. And while I recognize that I can't save my children from racism, I'm not going to push them into it either. And so those issues, I think, is like makes it such a huge issue for Black parents when they are blessed enough to have a choice where to send their children to school, to make that choice. professionally, you would think that a lot of people are deferential to judges. We have sentencing power after all. But when Kim Cocroft and I were appointed in 2009, I was 34, she was 35. And I noticed over the years a huge difference. Because when we were appointed, there were 3 days of newspaper articles about how Governor Strickland, they almost said he went to the daycare center and the Rife Center and just picked up, 2 people and put them on the bench. The way the tone was, what a huge mistake he made. Then I noticed there was a white woman appointed, only 1 day of newspaper articles. And when she was appointed, when she was in her mid-30s, a white man was appointed in his mid-30s, and you would have thought he was a direct descendant of George Washington. Just the way he was brought up. It was such a huge difference. Such a huge difference. It had to do with race. It had to. And then in one of those articles, the person, 2 in the old courthouse, and actually in the current courthouse too, 2 judges share chambers. And the person, when I was first appointed, that had made comments in the newspaper, basically saying there was no way that Judge Cocroft and I were qualified to do the job, he ended up being my chambermate. So his off, like if you think of the chambers, one judge is on this side and the other judge is on that side. And then we shared a magistrate, we shared a secretary. So imagine my dismay when I learned that my chambermate was calling me a nappy-headed girl to anybody that would listen. And it was very disheartening. But what was the scariest thing was to realize that that man had been sentencing people. He had been sentencing Black people for 20 years. And was going to continue to be on the bench. So while the comment was directed at me, the scariest part about it was how he was going to affect my people that came in front of him. And just through the years, I can't tell you, how many, in today's culture, a lot of times the racism isn't outright. You're not being called a name. It's a look. It's a glance. And you know what it is. I remember a lawyer calling me up, and he was basically trying to explain the justice system to me, because I don't know, maybe he thought I'd never been to law school, but racism has reared its head throughout my career, even to the point where it was shocking when I realized that I'm only the second Black judge on the Court of Appeals and the first Black woman. And I want to make sure to address your comment, Pastor Wise, about the prison. I agree that it is sad that that money had to go to a new jail, but it needed to happen. And the reason why is because I think long term, it's going to help us keep people out of jail. In conjunction with things like bond and bail reform, that new jail is going to keep people, especially those who haven't pled guilty or been found guilty by a jury, out of jail just because they can't afford to pay a bond. It will also help because you can actually be screened for mental health issues. So instead of sitting in jail, not getting treatment for your mental health issues, and deputies being the ones responsible for giving you your medicine, you will actually be screened. The problem can be identified, and we can get you where you need to go faster. So I completely agree. I hate that that money had to be spent on that, but it is going to improve the system vastly. And how your second question, how racism can be eradicated, at least in my world is voting and paying attention to the issues. I don't mean just voting for judges. I also mean voting in the prosecutor's race. You know, you've heard so many times that, you know, we are presented with an opportunity. And I have been reminding people that the Franklin County prosecutor's race is on the ballot in 2020. So, of course, judges can't endorse candidates, but I encourage everyone to ask questions. I encourage them to educate themselves about those candidates, because prosecutorial discretion plays a huge part. So when our community was angered, feeling like only Black elected officials were being prosecuted, when we were angered, that when we felt that police officers who did bad things were not being prosecuted, all of that comes under the prosecutor's office. And so if you think that there should be a change there, now is the time to do it. The other way that the prosecutor's office impacts the criminal justice system is the ability for our people to get into programs that will help eradicate their conviction at the end. So, for example, they through the prosecutor's office, you have the diversion program, where if you meet certain expectations, you go through that program and you are never found guilty. And that is not on your record. Intervention in lieu of conviction is another program that is really geared towards people who have addictions. But all of the, hi, that's Spencer. And I, you know what, honestly, Spencer regularly bombs my Zoom calls, but especially right now, I don't care, because this is why I'm here. This is why I'm talking to you. This is why I'm trying to get things changed. So his life is different. So I don't have to worry about if Spencer goes to walk the dog. So I don't have to worry about Spencer being given a fair shot when he gets out of school and wants to get a job. This is why I'm here. He's 5 years old with no shirt on now on my Zoom call. Okay, Spencer. Okay. You know, this is why we're doing it. We're trying to implement change for ourselves and for our children. So that's okay. And to the question about, well, let me back up for a second. I think it's important for everyone to know that everybody can get in where they fit in on this. You do not have to try and figure out how you can change the world with this. There are small things that people can do. You know, of course, someone like my stepmother, who's a congresswoman, she has the ability to make change on a very, very large scale. But I would submit to you that all of us can make small changes that have a ripple effect. So, for example, teach your Black son what to do if he's stopped by the police. If you have a white ally right now that's asking you how they can help, tell them to teach their white son about these issues, and tell their white son, if something goes down, don't leave my son by himself. There are so many small things that we all can do. We can vote, again, for judges, for prosecutors, for the mayor. Don't get stuck on the president. You have to go all the way down. You can educate people about how our issues right now are historical. It's almost just like a volcano that has just been boiling and rising to the top. So, for example, I remember one time I was in my FOP screening for their endorsement, and they asked me, was I a strict constructionist of the Constitution? And that it means, do I believe that the Constitution is to be followed word for word? And I was honest with them. I was unafraid. And I told them, I said, no, because when the Constitution was written, I was 3/5 of a person. And then as a woman, I still didn't get the right to vote till 1920. And then even after that, we're talking about poll taxes and different things like that. So how can I, as a Black woman, say that I think that the Constitution should be strictly adhered to? Because when it was written, it had me as a fraction. And the other thing that you can do, again, I'm not up this year, so I'm not doing this for my own benefit. If you have $5 or 5 minutes of your time to donate to the excellent Black leadership that we have in Columbus, that's another thing that you can do, because they're out here fighting the fight and we need to keep them there. And unfortunately, elected officials, or their power, if you will, is oftentimes judged by how much money they raise. So, you get a whole bunch of people to give $5, that helps our elected officials. So please don't think that you have to do something really huge. There are small things that we can all do to advance this cause.
Right. Now, I wonder, Judge, of course, we know the judicial system in the eyes of many appears to be set up for our brothers and sisters to fail and to disproportionately negatively affected by it. From your perspective and your experience on the other side of things, is there anything that we can support, any agendas or issues that we as voters can rally behind that can actually make some meaningful change?
I have two areas pop into my mind. One, I think that bond reform is going to be a very big issue for us in the criminal justice system, because so many of us are stuck there. One with, well, you know what? Let me back up a second. So, for example, right now, Salon, Jared Skinner, and a Black judge on municipal court, there are very different bonds being set in his courtroom from people from the weekend than right down the hall from him. So it's very important that, sometimes people look at Black judges and say, oh, you're part of the problem, you with the man and everything. But the Black judges that I know are making changes from within and doing really good work. And it's just so important that we're there. So vote for your Black judges. Vote in another example, though, that's not a Black judge. I don't know if you've seen on Facebook, Judge Chris Brown, he wrote a letter to the FOP saying that he was not, and he used to be a prosecutor. He wrote a letter to the FOP saying that he wasn't screening and why. He acknowledged to them that he was a prosecutor and that he had lots of good experiences with police officers, but he said until they got rid of the bad apples that messed up the whole bunch, he wasn't willing to support them or screen for their endorsement. So not only vote for your Black judges, also vote for allies. There is a website. It's not quite up yet because it's not close enough to the election, through the Supreme Court, that can give you all the information that you want to know about judicial candidates. So educate yourself. The other thing that I think is really important is supporting any efforts around MBE certification, because that is going to be, we cannot get stuck in the criminal justice space for ourselves, we also have to look at economic development for ourselves. And, it was very interesting to hear Mr. Smoot. I mean, Smoot, it's a huge construction company in Columbus. You see their signs all over the place. You go other places and see their signs. But to hear Mr. Smoot talk about how even to this day, he still has to prove himself and prove that his company can do the work, it can be discouraging. So we need, so for example, like that editorial that the Dispatch wrote, telling Mayor Ginther that if he wants to ensure that there are minority-owned companies that get contracts for COVID recovery situations, and the Dispatch editorialized that he should make sure that they're qualified to do the work that they do, which really assumes that they're not. We have to support people who are getting us on that path towards economic development for our community.
Mm-hmm. Your Honor, you mentioned something about how so often in the workplace, we do have to prove ourselves. And I think that is something that so many of us definitely feel. Lavinia on Facebook, she mentions, it's great to see multiracial support, but now those opposed are even more angry. How do we brace ourselves for the backlash and keep the change going?
Wow, good question.
I think it is so hard. So I want to acknowledge that first. I can only tell you what I have done in my own experience, because of course you hear somebody calling you a nappy-headed girl and you want to go let them know, but I could not do that. And the reason why I could not do that was because I felt as though then I was feeding into every stereotype that he had about Black women. I was proving him right. And then I was not moving the needle for the Black women judges that came behind me. Yeah. So I took a deep breath, said, had a little talk with God real quick, because, you can have like 5-10 seconds. And that helped me to respond accordingly. But one, you have to be unafraid. Sometimes when we find ourselves in those circumstances, it is scary. We have to acknowledge that too. But in order to move the needle, we cannot be afraid, and we have to speak up.
Amen to that. Amen to that.
Thank you.
Dr. Wise, is there anything else that you'd like to ask of Judge Beatty Blunt?
Well, I like.
I have one other thing.
Go ahead.
One other thing that I would like to share. I think somebody had asked, what do us as elected officials do? One thing, I have done things as a judge. For example, one of the big things that Judge Cocroft and Judge Reese and I did when we were all on the Court of Common Pleas General Division, we pushed for more diversity in our probation department, because the probation department was actually made up mostly of white women. And I'm not saying white women are bad, but I think that when people come into the probation department, no matter who you are, you need to see somebody that looks like you, particularly if we are trying to change behavior. So that was something that I did just on my job, 2 meetings to move the needle, to make things better for my community. But the other thing that I do is I talk to kids a lot, because I do believe that you can't be what you don't see. I recognize I grew up in politics. I was very fortunate. I grew up seeing Jerry Hammond. I grew up seeing, of course, my dad. I grew up seeing Mr. Espy. I grew up seeing Janet Jackson. And so I want to be for young kids what those people were for me. And not only is it important for Black kids to see me, it's important for white kids to see me too. because it is important also for white children to see a Black woman in a position of authority. So, like I said, there's something that we can all do in our corners of the world. That's what I choose to do.
Great.
Wonderful. Thank you.
You have the seal of approval, Pastor Wise.
You got the seal. You got the seal. Like you said, you follow directions.
That's when we say good night.
Right. Okay. I am going to have to get off in a minute to put them to bed.
Yes. But
thank you so very much for joining us. You've helped us a lot. You gave us a list. You gave us a good list.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also, Pastor Wise, I have no problem. I enjoy explaining the judicial system to people. So if there's ever an opportunity to do that for Faith Ministries members, please give me a call, and I can let you know what each court does.
Well, you remember you already did that. I brought a delegation of people from out of the country down to your court, and you explained that to us. And so we appreciate it. We appreciate it.
Well, call on me whenever you need me.
Another
contact. Right, I was gonna say we need to contact you for school for.
Yeah. So thank you for making.
Okay, so much. It's no problem. Me and Spencer will gladly do something for you.
Sounds great.
I wanted to say thank you so much. She's gone.
Keep talking. You can still say thank you.
Okay, I wanted to say thank you so very much. We are so very proud of you, and we pray for you because we know it's not easy, but just keep on. And I know the Lord is going to make things better for all of us.
Thank you.
Amen. And we are going to keep on pushing forward as well. We have another guest. We'd like to introduce Councilman Mitchel Brown. And while we're bringing him in, I'll just tell you a little bit about him. Councilmember Brown began his career as a paramedic, and among other things, he has experience serving as a registrar for the Bureau of Motor Vehicles. He's also served our country in the United States Air Force. So thank you for your service there. Mr. Brown was unanimously appointed to Columbus City Council in 2016 and elected to a new term in 2017. He served as the director of the City of Columbus Department of Public Safety. And his bio is very long. I just had to pick off a couple things there, but I'm sure he will speak for himself. And we welcome you, Councilman Brown, to the conversation.
Well, thank you, Pastor Wise and First Lady. Good to see you both again. I think it's very interesting. Am I coming through?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. When you heard from my friend Kevin Boyce, and obviously from Judge Beatty Blunt, a lot of things came out very, very clearly for all of us. With Kevin, again, the issue that he talked about was he failed to mention that he was very, very pivotal in getting a young man that was initiating some problems in the community at that particular time, just expressing himself, and he went to jail. Kevin worked aggressively to get him out of jail, and it's a testament to him to make sure that he hasn't lost the common touch. And Judge Beatty Blunt spoke about something that to me is very, very important, and that is voting. Yes, voting from the bottom up. Of course, we want to deal with the person in the White House, but certainly addressing your county commissioners, your city council members, your mayors, your prosecutors, because they make a difference in your everyday life. And the reason why they make a difference is they appoint the chiefs of police. They appoint the folks who are going to have a direct impact on your life. So that's very, very significant. Pastor Wise, you've known me for a while. And the question of how has racism impacted me during my career? Racism, I became aware that the color of my skin made a difference when I was 7 years old. Spencer was there with Laurel 2 years beyond him, in Pittsburgh, my hometown, I went to an amusement park with a friend of mine who was white. His mother took us to the amusement park. We took our swimming trunks. We went to the pool, and I was forced out of the pool and was told that I had no right to be there and I should have known better. My friend didn't understand and went and got his mother. His mother went and came and said, "What's the problem?" And he said, clearly, you know, black folks ain't supposed to be in the pool. You should know better than that. Very first time, 7 years old. It's indelible in my mind. There are multiple instances in my career where I had to deal with the issue of racism and figure out how was I going to change the focus and address the problems, especially from taking care of people as a paramedic and being involved in emergency medicine. But even when I was in the military, there was racism. And for me in particular, in the early 60s, I was asked to participate in the circumstances about going down south and sit at the lunch tables. And my mother told me I couldn't go. And she told me I couldn't go because she said, you know, you're a hothead and you'll end up going to jail and I won't be able to get you out. That bothered me because I really wanted to go, but she was right. I was a hothead. I did get into trouble. And I probably would have went to jail and maybe would not have been here. But you learn from those instances because my daughter was down at the protest these past few days. And she remembered me telling her the story about my mom not allowing me to go down south and participate in the sit-ins. Racism manifests itself in so many different ways. And it's taking the time to have the discussion with people who don't look like you. And for them to have the discussion with other folks who do look like them that are very, very honest and straightforward. Getting involved with the police has been a very, very interesting element of my life. My mom died when I was 17. I came home from school or from work, found her on the floor, put her on the couch. We called police. They showed up in those days, and 2 white police officers came into our place and told us she's drunk and we're not carrying her nowhere. It made an impression on me. I picked my mom up. I carried her down the steps, put her in the back of a paddy wagon. We took her to the hospital. She laid in the hospital emergency room in the hallway for an hour, and she died 5 days later from a cerebral hemorrhage. Those things make an impact on your life. And I wasn't very happy with God for allowing it to happen. So what did God do? He put me involved with emergency medicine, and subsequently in the mid-'80s, I became the safety director in the city of Cleveland under George Voinovich. You learn how to get the police to do what you want them to do. It's not an easy task, but it can be done. The behavior of the police officers this past week, in the sense of their engagement with peaceful protesters, they didn't use de-escalation techniques. That has to be reviewed, and the people who were engaged in that, as Kevin expressed, have to be held accountable. You got to train them. You got to educate them on what is appropriate and what is proper with regards to engagement with peaceful protesters. I have put together a civilian review board in Cleveland in the mid-'80s. Some work, the majority of them don't, because they don't get the funding and the staffing and the recognition that they have genuine authority to make change and hold folks accountable. My colleagues on council, and I know the council president, along with the city attorney's office, and certainly the mayor, are now moving towards that issue. And I will do everything I can to help make certain that the design and the funding for that activity is available to them. Tomorrow, the mayor, the chief of police, and the chair of the Columbus Community Safety Advisory Committee, Janet Jackson, will be doing a presentation on where we stand. They submitted the final report in January this year. Tim Quinlan was appointed the chief of police about 2 months after that. He's been in the office for a relatively short period of time, but has worked aggressively to deal with the issues that the mayor has expressed his undenying concern and willingness to make a change. I am not one of those individuals calling for the mayor's head or to call for Chief Quinlan's head. I'm calling for accountability. Doesn't make any difference in the sense of, okay, now we're going to get rid of this person and put somebody else there. No, let's hold the folks who are there appropriately accountable for the jobs that they said they would do. And then when they don't demonstrate the ability to do that, then you make a change. I'm very disconcerted about what's going on in our society today when we talk about racism, but I was down at the protest yesterday and I ran into the mayor and I was watching again the composition of the protesters. And it genuinely was about 50-50, 50% white, 50% black. And I saw some older people. I saw some folks there with their children and conveying the appropriate message about treating everybody with mutual respect. That's what we have to work towards. I have to tell you another story in the city of Columbus when the Ku Klux Klan was here. And I was a safety director, and I was talking to a person who was in charge of the Ku Klux Klan, and he had a baby in his arms, and he was calling me all kinds of names and talking about my mother, which he had no idea how close he came to not surviving for doing that. But I made sure that his First Amendment rights were not violated. He said, you're going to get to do what you got to do. The irony of that discussion as he was screaming at me was there was a police lieutenant who was standing right beside me. And when the guy walked away, the lieutenant said, Director, can I said, no, you can't do anything. That's not the way this is going to work. We got to make sure they get to do what they got to do and let them get out of here. The officer went on to do a variety of other good, positive things because he saw the restraint that I exhibited, but also the courage to say, hey, we're going to make a change. We have made changes in the Columbus Police Division. We have to make more, and we will make more. And I say we because, again, it used to be my baby, obviously, when I was the Director of Public Safety. But as a legislator, it is my responsibility to try and provide them with the resources to do the job that they need to do. And those resources go to having body-worn cameras. Those resources go to having the appropriate education about implicit bias and how to deal with that. Those resources have to go to providing something you'll be hearing about called a Safety Forces Residential Incentive Plan. We need to have our officers and our firefighters live in the city to which they are sworn to serve and protect. Not all of them. I don't expect all of them to do that, but let's get them live in the community which you are sworn to protect. In the early 80s, that law, the state legislature changed it that you didn't have to live in the city in order to protect that particular city. That's the way it is, right. But that doesn't mean we can't have incentives for people to live in the community. So when you go to the grocery store, or you go to the library, or you go to the movie house, if we still have movie houses, you run into people that you know. You run into a law enforcement officer that you know, and he or she gets to know you as a person. When you're out cutting the grass in your house, if that's where you live, they're cutting their grass as well. They have a different perspective on what you bring to the table when they live next door to you. As opposed to what we're running into now is the inability to recognize people as the same. and recognize people with the proper respect. I will say to you, because I know Tom Quinlan, I know that's something he wants to make happen. I know Andy Ginther, I know that's something that he wants to make happen. And the report that you're going to hear from Janet Jackson addresses a number of those issues, and we have to be about the business of making it happen. In my case, there could be a lot to talk about, but I'm going to let you ask me some questions.
Yes, we do have a question from Facebook. Tobias is asking or stating, we've been accustomed to being satisfied with surface cosmetics, which placate us for the moment. But he's asking what efforts are being made to secure permanent solutions. He mentions that bad apples in the police department are often protected by the police unions. How can we change this? Dealing with bad apples when he says the whole apple cart may need to be turned over.
Good question. And there's issues associated with misconduct on the part of police officers. And how do you hold them accountable? And working with the FOP, FOP is going to be around, so we got to work with them. We got to figure out how to make it happen. You can't just say, okay, we're going to fight you a tooth and nail, because then we don't get anything done. There's ways in which when an officer is involved in misconduct, that it goes on his record. How long does it stay on his record? So that if the opportunity presents itself for promotion, hey, wait a minute, we got to go back and talk about this time when you stopped somebody for no reason and give us an explanation for why that took place, whether or not we're going to let you be in a position of authority. There are ways in which to deal with that today. The question is making people come to grips with the fact that when they present those issues, that we hold the appropriate folks accountable. My record speaks for itself. When I fired police officers in Cleveland, I put police officers in jail. But by the same token, they all know I treated them fairly. But I will not tolerate inappropriate conduct with regards to others. Simply will not do that. And I've had the benefit of hiring or having police chiefs that felt the exact same way. We've been fortunate that in the city of Columbus, we had a Jim Jackson, historical figure with regards to law enforcement in the city of Columbus and what he had to endure to become the chief of police in the city of Columbus. All right. Right now, the highest ranking officer and a minority in the Columbus Police is a gentleman who just became a commander. We have to do better in that regard. You have to be able to be the ones who make the rules, but also the ones who enforce the rules. And that's why recruitment becomes so important. So, yes.
Tracy, I apologize. I was going to say, Tracy on Facebook says, will the city hold the officers accountable for their aggressive tactics used over the past few days?
There was Monday night, I talked to, before even talked to the chief, and I was very, very clear, and on a review of the conduct of the officers with regards to the peaceful demonstrators, and that those individuals who were inappropriate in their conduct must be held accountable. So I will certainly be looking at it myself to determine whether or not they are or not holding those folks appropriately accountable for their conduct for peaceful protesters.
Exactly.
And even though I'm a council member, I can still be able to make an impact to a degree on what people do and how they do it.
There you go.
Yes.
Speaking of making an impact on what people do and how they do, the members of our church probably don't know that you were partially responsible for keeping me out of jail due to an intervention that you were involved in. This may have been 3-4 years ago. I don't remember how long ago it was, but it was a while ago. And I think it was during the Ferguson uprising or whatever situation with Mr. Brown. And I was so outraged. I was so mad that I said, I got to talk to somebody, because if somebody don't come over here and talk to me quick, I cannot promise you what I'm going to do. So I called Rick Pfeiffer, who at the time, was he a city attorney? He was something. Was he city attorney then?
City attorney. Yes.
Okay,
sir.
So he was city attorney, and I was just letting him have it. He said, okay, I'll be right over. And he came over and he brought you. And the two of you sat on the couch in my office and talked to me for about an hour, trying to calm me down. And next thing I know, I'm on a commission for the body cams. Next thing I know, the current safety director belongs to our church. And all of that happened because of an intervention that you guys did. So I thank you for that all these years later.
Pastor Wise, again, this small acts can lead to big events. We have body cameras now because, again, of your involvement and assisting and how we hold folks appropriately accountable. The body cameras, the technology has improved tremendously. I'm old enough to remember the Rodney King incident in 1992 and how people filmed that. Now we have our own body cameras to be able to hold our officers appropriately accountable for their conduct. And the technology is getting better. I know because I had conversations with the chief about how do you make certain that the body cameras come on automatically. I don't want someone to have to push the button when they're involved in a crisis situation. I want the button to come on automatically so we can determine whether or not the officer did or did not do what they're supposed to do. We have to use technology today to our advantage, whether or not we use drones, a variety of different things, but use them for the right way to improve the way in which police officers serve the citizens of our city and our country.
Councilman Brown, before we let you go, we've got one more question. Veronica, she asked, how do we not hire bad apples fired from other jurisdictions?
Oh, that's again something that we can work on aggressively. Yeah, because the way the rules are set up so that we don't have access to some information, but in Columbus, you have to go through our training program. You got to go through the Columbus Police Division training program in order to be a police officer. Most of the officers are homegrown. They may have had some experience somewhere else, but they have to come through the Columbus Police Academy. And that means they've got to learn and adopt the core values, professionalism, respect, integrity, discipline, enthusiasm. And Tom Quinlan has initiated a set of values called integrity, compassion, accountability, respect, and excellence. So that if an officer was not exactly exemplary in one jurisdiction, he cannot or she cannot come to the city of Columbus and get a job.
Okay. Thank you for answering that. Thank you.
Absolutely.
And thank you for joining. Oh, please go ahead.
Peaceful protest does bring about change. I said I wanted to go spend time with Dr. Martin Luther King and was unable to do so. But we made him, when I graduated from high school, he was in our yearbook. We dedicated our yearbook to Dr. Martin Luther King. I've always felt comfortable with the acknowledgement of nonviolence to bring about change. It may take a little longer, but it does happen. All we have to do is look around at the things that have occurred. Yes, Barack Obama is someone I know. He's, in my lifetime, I never thought that would ever happen. But we did make it happen. And the way you make it happen is by voting. We have, and just before I close for you, Pastor Wise, to appreciate, as African Americans, we've got to do a better job ourselves. Today, it's June, and in the city of Columbus, we've had 43 homicides of Black people and violence against other Black people. We've got to stop that and put all of our focus on holding the police accountable.
That's a statement.
Powerful.
Yes. So thank you so much for joining our conversation, and I took some notes. So.
Yes. Thank you so much for your time and your thoughts. We really appreciate that.
Absolutely. And you're going to have on Chief McNatt. She's a wonderful lady. I know her. She's doing a fantastic job at the Ohio State University. And when you talk about change, just think about the fact that the chief of police at the Ohio State University, which has over 50,000 students and a budget that is incredible, has a female chief of police, an African-American female chief of police. That's progress.
Yes, yes. And that's an excellent segue as well. So thank you for that.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, sir, for joining us. And now we're going to move on and welcome our next guest, who, as you have already heard, is Chief Kimberly Spears McNatt. And as we're bringing her in, here's a little info about her. She's a graduate of the Ohio State University and Franklin University. Chief Spears McNatt began her law enforcement career at OSU on the Columbus campus. And after around 25 years of service, on January 1st, 2018, she became the first female chief of the United States of America. Not yet. After 10 more years. She became the female chief of the Ohio State University Police Division. And she currently serves in that capacity, has received several awards and honors, and she happens to be a member of Faith Ministries Church. So it's wonderful and a good thing to welcome you to our conversation. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yes. Well.
Me? Okay. So thank you, Dr. Wise, for the phone call. First Lady, it's good to see everyone besides Sunday. Got a call from Dr. Wise when I was at work. It was like around 7:30 or 8 o'clock. And, you know, when he calls and asks you for a favor, you're like, okay, how can I help? So that was definitely a call that I was not expecting at work, but I am glad to be here and participate. Salon, you read my bio, but that's just details. I really want to take time to be able to share a few words and then answer a few questions. And so just want to start off by saying that, you know, equality means affording everyone the same protection, the rights and opportunities. We are all in a position to make a difference and to speak up and take action. These last few days, for me personally, has been very hard. Being an African-American female in law enforcement, I have received feedback, the side-eyed, a 360-degree view round of people's opinions, comments, and to remind people that I'm also human. I also understand that our community is hurting and why it's important for us to stay engaged and help each other. I am too disappointed. I am exhausted by the images, hearing the pain from parents, friends, and mothers of our people in our community that's Black and brown, how minorities are treated, especially African Americans, how our lives are disregarded as if they do not matter. And I'm here to say that we do matter, period. I share those same concerns. I have family, I have friends, I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I have a 16-year-old son. And so when I see these things happening across the country as a mom, I have those exact same feelings and concerns when my son, my husband, my friends and family walk out the door. With that being said, I do realize to whom much is given, much is required. And because of the position that I am, that I hold, that what gives me the motivation to get up every day, put on a uniform and go do the job, because I have to make a difference. I have to believe there is a better world. I have to leave this world a better place for my son, for my family, for my friends, for my church, because if not me, then who? And as a leader, you have to be willing to move when others stand still. And so being a member of Faith Ministry, even though I can't see you guys in person, Sunday morning, faithfully, I'm live streaming because that is where I get my encouragement. That is where I find my peace, or I get my strength. W. Shauna Gibbs is my rock. And so there's a lot of times we have conversations that she keeps me balanced, and she's the wind at my back, because I'm telling you, there's some days that is very hard. And so it's important that I have people around me, a community that love me and that continue to support me. And the fact that when Dr. Wise called and said, can you help? My answer was yes. So far as an action plan, I think Judge Beatty Blunt, Mitch Brown, they really hit it the nail on the head. There's some things that as a community we need to do. We have to exercise your right to vote. We have to exercise our right to vote. You need to know your city councilman, your mayor, your governor, Congress, judges. There's a primary election, a general election. And if nothing else, on Tuesday, November the 3rd of 2020, on Tuesday, on November the 3rd of 2020, please go out and vote. People are protesting, rightfully so. People want change, and we need to have change. People have listened. Now they're ready to take action, and they need to vote so their words can be heard. Participate in town hall meetings, community meetings. When the city is asking for residents' input, be heard. Don't wait for someone else to speak up for you. Let your voice be heard. As far as a community action plan, law enforcement is going to be here. And so we really need to engage law enforcement regardless of where you live. If you live in a suburb, if you live in the city, regardless, you still need to hold those agencies accountable and let your voice be heard. Call on your state legislators to ensure that they hold their local agencies accountable for their actions. Don't just let the conversation go between you and a friend, that you really need to call and make sure that it's documented. I don't believe in reinventing the wheel. And I think President Barack Obama, when he was in office, he created a task force that gave law enforcement guidelines how we can move forward and what some of the best practices are. Most law enforcement agencies have it, are aware of it. They should be using it if you really want to see the change that they're looking for. I won't go over all of them, but some of the things he said was, one of them was change the culture of policing. And that's really huge. Change the culture. And how do you do that? I mean, leadership is not for everyone, and it's not for the faint of heart, but you really have to change the culture of an agency for the changes that people want to see. And that's really how the people that you recruit, how you train your officers, and most importantly, the people that you retain, then also who you promote. Because you have to promote leaders that are going to be transparent and be able to hold people accountable. A lot of these situations that you see that is happening across the country, it really is due to the lack of accountability across the board, where everyone wants to be hands off or rubber stamp it. And as a leader, that's your job, to hold people accountable and change the culture where it's not a warrior mentality, it's a guardian mentality. Realize that you are here to protect and serve, and the community needs you and you need the community. And right now, and it's just my opinion, the trust is gone. And you have to figure out a way to build that trust where people are comfortable calling law enforcement and not feeling that they're going to be put in harm's way by making a phone call. And so because I am an African-American woman in law enforcement, that is why I get up every day to make that difference, because I think of all the officers that I know, from men, women, different races, religions, who have done a phenomenal job and have done good work. And to see the things that are transpiring here has set us back. Every day you have good officers out there on the front line trying to make a difference, doing a good job. And we definitely want to see, as people call them, the bad apples gone, because they're making our work a lot harder as we try to build better communities. So I will say, for the people who are asking, what can we do next? You have to vote, know your end game, and realize that we are here to protect and serve, and we all should be held accountable.
Definitely. Those are some very important words, and there are some questions out here, and really some comments that kind of speak to what you have already said. Jackie says, "Don't excoriate all police, because Black officers are standing in the gap and doing all we can to protect our citizens. We can't help without support from our community." And I can just imagine the tension even within being a police officer responsible for other officers during this time, but also being a Black woman. You're standing in police boots that many may consider to belong to the enemy, but you yourself are part of the group that many believe have been victimized or negatively impacted more. So, I mean, how is that? Like, how do you handle that dichotomy?
A lot of prayer. A lot of prayer. It really is a balancing act, but I have to be true to myself. The officers that I supervise, keeping them encouraged, because it can be taxing on you, regardless of your race, especially when you're a good officer trying to do the right thing and you see what's going on around you in the world. For me, trying to, not explain, but help people understand how minority communities are feeling. It's real. People are hurting. And it's not just to say this is an isolated incident. I think if we all honest with each other, this is a history. There's been incidents across the country. So you can't say, oh, this is just one isolated incident. Helping people understand the dynamics and why people are feeling the way they are feeling. So I do, on a daily basis, have a very challenging job trying to keep my employees motivated, encouraged, and also having those honest, conversations, because that's where it starts. You have to be able to have those conversations to move forward.
I have a question, and it might be a loaded question, but how are you handcuffed by racism from doing the things that if you could do it, you could do it? Do you understand my question?
Yes.
In other words, just about everybody I know in a position of power, there are things that if they could do it, they would just do it. But even though they're in positions of power, they can't do it. So what are some of those things for you?
Right. So a lot of times, Mitchel Brown's talked about union contracts. Sometimes when you want to remove an employee, sometimes the contracts, people are able to retain their jobs and you have to work in those confinements. And, and there's union laws and make sure that, your HR and you're following the policies, and it's not as easy as people may think when you realize that maybe we should no longer retain a person and help them transition. That it's not an easy process. Sometimes it's always a progressive discipline, and people have things removed from their personnel file because the time has expired. And so when you really are trying to say, okay, maybe this person is really not cut out for law enforcement, they may have a better career somewhere else, there's things that sometimes restrain you from making that happen. And then sometimes it's not always easy being the only woman in the room, and you have to let them know that you're there for a reason and that your voice matters and you should have a seat at the table.
Right.
Yes, I just appreciate just hearing from you, and we just want to encourage you. You are there for a reason. Just seeing you in your place of position, we appreciate you, and we thank you for your service. We really do.
Definitely. And Charlotte has a question. Oh, go ahead.
No, go
ahead.
I was just gonna say how proud we are of you and how you have allowed the Lord to use you and to go to work every day and to do what you need to do. And so you are definitely in our prayers too, because we know how hard it is, not only as a police chief, but as a woman. So we applaud you and just do it. You got it. I'm so thankful.
And I think just sometimes with people, when I take off my uniform, I'm still a person. I look just like you, Sunday live streaming here on the couch. If I'm out at Walmart or, I'm out at Target or I'm hanging with W. Shauna Gibbs, I'm still a person. So getting people to understand that they sometimes just see the uniform and forget that we police officers are also human, that we have family and friends that love us and care about us just the same. And so I realized that for whatever reason, God put me in this position, for young girls or young boys, to let them know that, you too can do this and we can be the change that we want to see in our community.
Yes. And Charlotte has a question on Facebook. She's asking, how do you address these issues with your own son?
Charlotte, that is such a very good question. And my son asked me about George Floyd, and his question was like, Mom, why did that happen? And I had to look at him and tell him, my son's name is Colin. I was like, Colin, that was just wrong. It's not acceptable. It should have never happened. And having to explain that to your son and being law enforcement, nothing could tear at your heart more, because this is a job that he sees me do, and to see people in my profession behave like that, that is the hardest conversation, because as a mother, you want to keep him safe. And I too have to have that talk with my son. So when I say that I understand, I feel the same pain, I still have the same concerns, because when I'm not in uniform, I look like everybody else in the community.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Oh my gosh.
Definitely. And that's something that's important to remember, because I know we can get conditioned. I mean, we see all of these images related to the latest shooting or the latest instance of police brutality, but to remember that that is one of many. Yes, it is systematic and it needs to be dealt with, but there are people, the majority of the people out there who are doing that job are doing it with a good heart, with good intentions, and they have families, and we don't need to just cast a whole net over an entire profession. So yes, and Tracy online apparently went to college with you. She says that you've always had a heart for the people, so you could use her for a recommendation if you ever need one.
Exactly.
Thank you.
The things that you were just describing, it reminds me of, there's a poem I recently heard. It was written by a police officer in Milan, Tennessee. That's where I'm originally from. And he wrote a poem called Black and Blue. And he spoke of the very things you're mentioning, of when he puts on the uniform and when he takes it off. He's a person, but the first thing they see is that he's a Black man. And so I just want to encourage you again. Thank you for what you are doing, and we are definitely continuing to pray for you.
And that's really how it should be, that we serve the community, that we are there to help. And so you see me as an ally, as not an enemy. And that's the relationship that you should have in your community. All law enforcement should have with their community, that we are there to help and it shouldn't be a fear when we show up. And that's the type of community policing that you want to have in an agency to change that culture, that you embrace everybody in your community.
That makes sense. That
Wonderful.
does. Yes. Well, we appreciate your time. Dr. Wise and Dr. Wise, do you have any other thoughts?
No, just thank you. Just thank you. And keep on representing.
Thank you.
Keep on keeping on.
Yes. Well, thank you so very much, Chief Spears,
McNatt.
And yes, I was looking like, what's that? No, but thank you for your time and for the work that you do. And we will see you online on Sunday, I guess.
Sounds great. Thank you.
And please remind everybody to vote in November.
There you go. Yes, definitely. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And yes, ma'am. And we also had another guest who was scheduled to be with us, but apparently he is having some technical issues that is preventing him from being with us. And that is Pastor Timothy Ahrens of the First Congregational Church, the United Church of Christ. But Dr. Wise, we know that he was personally affected, yes?
He had his computer died on him, and he said that he cannot get on the computer, but he can join us by phone. So I don't know if I give Mike his number, I think Mike already has his number. If Mike could patch him in on the phone and we could hear from him. I think, well, I don't think, but I know one of the reasons why I asked him to be a part of this conversation is because he's a white pastor. He belongs to and is the pastor of First Congregational Church downtown. And one of his pastors, one of the pastors of that church was literally one of the founders of the social gospel theology in America. So that church right there has a long history of being progressive and involved in civil rights and all of that kind of stuff. His own church, their property was vandalized during the recent protests and so forth over the last couple of days. And he's always been in the forefront of these kinds of issues. And one of the things that I wanted to do is to not only show that we do have people like that, but to have him share how this whole thing affects him and how he is going to do that. So Mike, if you can at least give us an idea, if you can get him on the phone, and if you can, we'll talk for a minute. If you can't, we'll just go on.
What we can do is, if you have your phone handy, you can just call him up, put him on speaker, and put it close to laptop, and hopefully he'll be able to be heard.
All right, I'll try that.
Yes, and in the meantime, we thank you all for being with us and sticking with us. We definitely want to hear from Pastor Ahrens. And just to recap, there have been a lot of mentions of voting.
Yes.
It's something that sounds so simple and sounds so obvious, but in many ways, it is one of the greatest things that we can do to make a difference. And somebody asked earlier, is there somebody who's registering all the protesters to vote? I'm not sure if they are, but in our own circles, to the right, in our own circles, we can definitely, beat that drum. Okay, we have some major issues that are coming up on the ballot, and we want to make sure that people around us are voting and making their voice heard.
Exactly.
Okay, can you hear me? Dr. Tim, can you hear me? You can?
Wait, now I can't hear you.
There you go.
Okay.
There it is.
Can you hear him, Salon?
We can hear him, and we'd like to welcome him. If he can hear us as well, I'll go ahead and introduce him a little more formally. We'd like to introduce Dr. Timothy Ahrens, who is the pastor of the First Congregational Church, United Church of Christ in downtown Columbus. He's a graduate of Macalester College, Yale Divinity School, Chicago Theological Seminary, and he is a strong and respected voice in the community. And he has advocated and continues to do so to end gun violence and to end the death penalty. He also helped found BREAD, which many of you know is a wonderful organization. BREAD stands for Building Responsibility, Equality, and Dignity, and he served there for 2 terms as a co-president. He is also a published writer, a leading voice, preaching social justice, fairness, and equal treatment for all. So we're happy to welcome by phone Reverend Dr. Timothy Ahrens. Welcome to the conversation.
Oh, wow. Good to be with you. Sorry, it's by phone.
Definitely, it's not a problem.
It dies, so I'm actually in my car getting a new cord. So we'll see what happens.
So go ahead, Dr. Timothy. Tell us what you want to tell us, how you see this whole thing, how it affects you, what your response is to the racism that we see in America, and what are some of the things that we can do and some of the things that you suggest that you and others do.
Well, first of all, it's a joy and an honor to be with you tonight. So thank you so much for having me. So you know, Dr. Wise, that I just published a piece. I've been a contributing editor to the Columbus African American News Journal pretty much on a regular basis, monthly basis, for the past 8 years. And the piece I just wrote, and it'll actually be published probably tomorrow, called "A Pandemic Within a Pandemic." And I make the case in there that we've been dealing with a pandemic in the United States for 400 years and more. And it arrived when people were taken as slaves and sold as slaves in Virginia in 1619. And it was brought to the shores not by people of African descent, but by the white people who did this. And it has plagued white people ever since. And it's, we've said it often enough that it's the original sin of our nation. But I also contend in this time of language and reality that's pandemic in nature, that it is the original sickness of our nation, because it in a sense has spread throughout every generation since, and it's in my family line, and it affects me, and it affects everyone who is white in America, without a doubt, but it affects everyone because it spreads beyond. So yeah, I mean, it's got to be stopped, and I make the case in there that, and it's my belief that the place to find the vaccine is, in a sense, to begin with repentance of sin, and we have to admit that we're sick with this. And that as white Americans, we continue to, accept the privilege that has come our way by no work, by no right of our own. White Americans might call it grace if we're Christians, but that's not what it is. It's white privilege. And there's grace everywhere, but this is different. And so, we have to confess what it is. We have to name what it is, and then we have to call it out in ourselves. So to me, that's very important. And as you know, Dr. Wise, one of the things that I said in the piece was that I'm a racist, and it's in me, right? It's similar. It feels very much similar to alcoholism. Where you've got to say, I've got a disease and it's alcoholism. And until we can name that, see it in ourselves, we can't start turning that around. So am I proud of that or pleased with that as a white American? No. I mean, I've battled my whole life against it, right? But sort of like the disease of alcoholism. It'll come up, you know, and it'll show itself in ugly ways in too many places and too many lives, too many days of the year. So anyway, so that's what I want to say to begin with. And, you know, so you asked the question, and this show asked the question, so what about solutions, right? Beyond the confession that we've got this sickness, it does not need to be a sickness unto death. It needs to be a sickness unto a vaccine. And the vaccine, if you will, is making right what is wrong. Right? One of the definitions that I've really been working with in relation to justice is when we see when someone sees what has been taken away from someone else, and it can be named and claimed, and it can be identified, and then that was taken is returned in full, you know? So that's the thing that I'm saying to me, is that it has to be returned in full. I've used the word reparations. I know some people freak out on how to figure out how to do reparations, but the way I define that is from embryo to the time someone is laid in the grave. For African Americans, we need to set the record straight starting now, and we need to, you know, give every child a chance from conception that is born into this country and into this mix of racism, and give them not only a chance, but make this right, and give them the best education, give them the best opportunities for jobs and for housing and for everything that makes for a good life, right? And so that's my belief. And it's funny, you know, I saw a piece today, Dr. Wise, that said that in this pandemic, billionaires have made a profit over the last couple months of $685 billion. And by the way, they're happy to keep that to themselves. But here's a case, you know, that if we want to make things right, we, you know, find a way to say to those who have the capacity and have profited off the pain of others, that they've got to turn that back. You know, we know where it comes from, and it needs to be returned. So anyway, so I'll stop there, but that's a beginning point.
It is a beginning point. So we've been talking last night and tonight about Black people having conversations with other Black people as we deal with what we're going through. We've also talked about Black people having conversations with white people. So tell us about some of your conversations with other white people about this, and have your actions caused a backlash from other white people?
And that's a really interesting question. You know, one of the things that in sharing my belief that now is the time for full reparations, and I got squeal back from a white friend, and you know, just like screeching and screaming at me. And I said, whoa. So let's back this up. And they said, how can we determine who should get what, you know, how that goes? And I said, well, you know, I think if someone has any African American blood in them, we say from here on out, we're going to make this right. I mean, if they're, you know, coming into the world. And so, you know, the person got all twisted and turned around about, you know, when someone came on a slave ship and can we trace the DNA? And I said, that's the wrong question. This is 2020, and let's see this as the year of Jubilee. Let's see this as the year of liberation. Instead of seeing this as the worst year in American history, let's make this the best year. Let's start again, and press the button, the reset button. That was easy button. So, you know, let's make it right. And so I think, you know, I heard a white friend the other night say, the struggle that white people have is that it's tied up in a knot between guilt and fear. And, the guilt on the one hand of all that has been wrong, and God forbid that we claim or name our part in that. And then the fear of, that white people carry about black people. And I said, where did that come from? And, he said, I don't know, but it's very irrational. And I said, perhaps it's fear of ourselves because of our mistreatment of another human being. I mean, again, Dr. Wise, if I hit or hurt one of my neighbors, right, I am always going to be aware where that neighbor is, where they live,
right,
how they're moving, what they're doing. I will carry a paranoia about the neighbor that I've hurt, right? And that's on me because I started it, and so it's on me to set it right, and to reconcile. One of the things I also said in my piece is, and I believe this is really true, is that we need to have relationships with one another. I mean, Dr. King said it well, that we're most segregated on Sunday morning, right? Mm-hmm. That we find our segregation. Well, we're not a lot better, Monday through Saturday. So, because, there's a language and talk that goes on with white people to white people and black people with black people. And we've lost our ability to talk with each other in genuine ways. And so it's incredibly troubling. And one of the things that I find is that white people don't like to be called white people, right? And well, we are, right? So, it's just like we want to be called German Americans, or we want to be called Polish Americans. We want to put ourselves in some Eurocentric location and say that's where we're from. But we're mutts. Most of us are real mutts. We're just white. So, I think we need to deal with that. Now, one of the beauties that I have experienced is, in a congregation which has a growing number of biracial and black members, what I found is with that, my children and the children of this congregation, speak the language of equality and love in a genuine way. I'm doing a piece that's going to run tomorrow for our church on all of the kids that have been down protesting. And they've been going, all the time, right? 2 of them are African American and 2 of them are white. But one of the girls who's white said, I have a lot of friends at Westerville South who are black or biracial. And she said, if I don't stand up now, then I can't face them and say I'm your friend anymore. And I thought, maybe this generation is the pivot point of hope. We always believe that about our kids. We believe they're going to be better than we are. But, maybe that kind of spirit and mentality and drive that Sophia has is more embodied in this generation than we're going to be able to name or give credit for. But I think there's a lot to be said for that. But it's not this generation I'm as worried about. I mean, as I see them rise and serve and march together, it's my generation that is a blockade of hope, and so, that's where the change has to come. And it has to come from white people, I mean, it can't come, it has to be for both, but we can't step forward without naming this stuff and this sickness inside of us. I don't know if you agree with me or not, but I mean, it's got to start with us. And, it was interesting as I was listening earlier to the judge, and she was talking about conversations between black people. And, that we talk to each other. And I was listening to this going, I'm listening to this, right? I'm here and I'm thinking, she's right. But until we can have conversations that cross those lines, conversations that are as deep, as genuine, as trustful, we're never going to get there. So it has to be based on a friendship, a relationship, a depth of compassion and care for one another that's real. Dr. Wise, I told you a story the other night, and we had a brief conversation about this. You know, on Saturday night, a lot of folks were downtown. The police drew a line at Grand Avenue on Broad Street. We're 1 block away on Cleveland and Broad. Hundreds of protesters in the Social Justice Park, the Washington Gladden Social Justice Park, on the grounds of the church, tagged the church in the park 10 times, broke a window. Really not much damage, right? But when I sent an email out, or not an email, but a text to my white colleagues, 2 of them responded, well, I said, I need your prayers. You know, please pray. 2 of them responded, well, we don't pray for buildings. You know, by the way, I'm gonna go deeper here. These were 2 men that I brought into Christian ministry, and I've never even thought about my building. I was talking about what was happening, right? It happened to be on the grounds of our church, but that's not what I was talking about. I was talking about young men, young women out on the streets that had changed from a focus of demonstration, and their anger now was just catapulting things, right? And so I send the same text, same appeal for prayer. 10 of my African-American friends and colleagues saying, how soon can we meet you there? We'll form a wall of prayer. You know, we will surround that place. This is holy ground. I mean, it's just like, this is it, right? And I have found that spirit split that way all my adult life.
I have a question for Dr. Aaron. Yes, I have a quick question for her.
I'm not sure he can hear us.
Yeah, I'm not sure if he can.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, Dr. Aaron, Derek.
Yeah, it's like you hear me, the cry at the depth, and you get it.
Here's a question for you. Go ahead, Ashley. What's the question?
Okay. Derek on Facebook says, I have several white friends that have asked what they should do to help with the cause. Some are afraid to make this public. So what do you suggest we say?
Did you get the question?
Yeah, so if white friends that want to help with the cause, I would tell these friends the statement that I made. I want them to look in your eyes. Tell Ashley. Is it Ashley that's asking this?
Yes.
Yes.
Look in your eyes and admit and confess that they are racists. And that, you know what? I did that with John Lewis. Wow. And John Lewis looked at me and he said, no, you're not. You're mostly black. But that was John Lewis. It wasn't for me to say. That was for John to say. That was for my hero to say as we were embracing, right? But I had to start with a primal scream, if you will. And I think that's where every white person has to start. We have to start with repentance, and then with relationships, and then with reparations. So it's sort of repentance, relationship, and reparations. So, I mean, if I can't say something out loud, that means that I'm more willing to stay stuck in the racist mentality of my family system that I grew up in than in the new family. And Christ calls us to make our family with one another, right? I find great inspiration from my colleagues and friends. I think of all places where there are interracial churches, and people have figured out some new ways to be Christ-like to one another. So I think you can't kind of say, well, I'm your friend, but I'm afraid to talk about it. Well, actually, it doesn't hurt to say you're afraid to talk about it, but then out of your fear, you need to step into faith. And you need to name what is true. and then work for forgiveness, work for reconciliation, and change your life. And that's got to come from a different place. So,
we're way over. We're way over. We promised people that we would be out at 8 o'clock, and it's after 9. But that's not your fault because you didn't come on until almost 9. But I got one last question. And I think we're going to wrap this up. Just about every Black person that I know knows the experience of being the only Black person in the room.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think that when you said there's a mixture of guilt and fear with many white people. So mostly every time I've ever been with you, you were the only white person in the room. So now my question is to those people who are afraid of what will happen if you're outnumbered by Black people, what has been your experience of being the only Black person, the only white person in the room?
The only Black person. Well, that's a really great question. And you know what? I could start on a journey that you may not even know I took. It happened about 15 years ago. I went realizing that the African American leaders of the civil rights movement were passing away. I mean, they were first in line at God's door into the heavenly gates, right? And I said, I've got to get to the South. I've got to go through the nation, go town to town. And I did this for weeks and weeks. I just got in my car and drove from town to town. I had some contacts in some towns, but some towns, like I ended up in Selma, I knew a few people, but they would introduce me to other people. Long story short is, I spent 3 weeks on the road, thousands of miles. I didn't talk to one white person for all that time. And in every town, in every house, there were times I knocked on a door and I said, I'm Tim Ahrens, I'm here to meet you and to say, I have 2 things I want to say. First of all, thank you for saving my soul in the work of the civil rights movement. And thank you for saving the soul of the nation. And I said, that's all I have to say. If you want to talk, I'm willing to listen. So I got to tell you, it was the best trip of my life. So I found myself in a women's boutique in Richmond, Virginia, and a hairdresser shop, just sitting with women. And this white guy walks in on a Saturday morning, and we end up spending the day together. Different people came in during the day, but I just was there. And actually, to answer the question is, I feel love in a more genuine way. I feel faith in a deeper way. I feel connection. I feel family in a way that I don't experience it in other enclaves, of white people. So I actually feel tremendously comfortable. And I've never, and maybe I'm just different. So I'm willing to say that might be the case, but I've always felt that way. I lived on my own in North Philadelphia for years, and I took my parents down, and we were driving around, and this was after college, and I said, the thing I love about this neighborhood is that it's such a great racial mix. And my mother looks at me and she says, Tim, you're the only white person we've seen for blocks and blocks. I don't know, but I think what my word is to everybody is, white people aren't as scary as you think they are, and some of them are really scary. But the more you find that real place with white brothers and sisters, you'll find peace with them too, I guess I would say. But I don't know if that answers your question, but I would just say that I have always found tremendous love, acceptance, and care. and compassion with Black communities and Black people.
Praise God. That's pretty much what I thought. Thank you so very much. I know you're working overtime. We had technological difficulties, but I think your message and your contribution is something that helps us. And of course, in the days to come, we'll continue our friendship and fellowship, and blessings on you and your ministry and your family.
And I thank you for putting up with my, you're looking at a computer and it keeps saying 5%, 5 minutes. 4%, you know that you're soon to expire. So you guys put up with a lot tonight waiting for me, and it was an honor to be with you. And I'm happy to come back anytime. I mean, however you want to set it up, you know that. You know I love you, I care about you, and I have always admired your teaching. You have shown me. I told you this, when I see your teaching, Dr. Wise, I want to be a student in your classroom because you have this incredible ability to see connections between things that almost nobody I know can see. And so as a teacher, you're one of my greatest teachers, and I just love and trust you as a friend on this journey. So thank you for allowing me to be with you tonight, at least on air, but not in person. In case you don't know, I do look white. I have white hair, as a matter of fact.
We have a picture of you on the screen. Yes. Just to prove it, we have a picture.
Oh, God.
Guys, thanks so much for having me be part of it. By the way, I heard about 85% of the program once I tuned in, so I was really impressed by everybody tonight. And again, it's an honor to be with you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks so much. All righty, take care. God bless.
Okay, Salon.
Yes.
Oh,
what an evening. What a conversation.
What a conversation. I know we couldn't cover it all.
Right.
I see that where Juanita, she made a great point. She said, after all the conversation, how do we interact change from housing to health insurance to the job market, etc.? We could go on and on.
Right.
But this was just a sampling of some first step actions that we realize voting is a big thing.
Right. And you're right. I mean, it is a first step, which suggests there are other steps after, which I would suppose would be continued conversation, continued action, just some things that I noted down. Everybody just about mentioned voting as something we can do. For African Americans, to ask white allies was the term, to speak up in their own spheres of influence, to talk to their sons, talk to their daughters, talk to their family and co-workers, encourage them to speak up when they see instances of inequality or some thinking that isn't equitable, let's say. That's probably not the right word. And somebody else said to donate or volunteer as you're able for leadership who stand for what you believe in. Somebody else said to set the example in your own conduct. What can you do? Just do the right thing yourself. Also talked about the importance of nonviolent protest, of course, surrounding yourself with people who prop you up, because it's not all about doing something. Sometimes you need others around you who can help you. Somebody else also mentioned, don't wait for someone to speak up for you, but to speak up. Go to the town hall meeting, go to city council, write that email to your representative. And Pastor Ahrens, to start with repentance. So there's a lot there.
It's a lot. Repentance, relationships, reparations. Was another comment as well.
Yes. And hopefully we'll be able to crystallize some of this and return together at some point after having had all this discussion and hearing what we can do, and we can make it a little more bite-sized, so we can all act on it.
Exactly.
Thoughts?
Well, I want to end by thanking you, Salon, because this was basically your inspiration or inspired by you, and of course, thank you for it. And I think it was in response to hearing and feeling what people are wanting to do. And because of that, we did this. And because of this, other people have been blessed by that. So thank you. Thank Mike and all of our media ministry, because our media ministry helped us to put this together. There are a lot of people literally behind the scenes, and to all of our guests and to all of you who've joined us. And if there's been some things that you think that you might want to see or hear again, it's being recorded and you can certainly play back. Do you have any final comments? Are you woke? This will pass your hour. We know that.
No, I really want to know, somebody please tell me how we can remake some of these laws that are out here, because we can talk forever. We can get encouragement. We can do a lot of stuff, but we need to remake some of these laws that are out here, because unless they are remade, they have to be either remade or they're going to be broken. So we have to figure out how we can remake some of these laws, because these laws are not for our best interests. So that's something that I'd like to have somebody explore or tell us how we can do that, because we can talk forever, but unless we figure out how some of these laws can be, I don't want to say broken, but sometimes they have to be broken and remade. That's how Martin Luther King and all the people got together. The laws were broken, but as a result, there was change. I don't know.
And somebody was asking, will there be some next steps sent out or something like that? I'm sure that we can put something together, like I was saying earlier, to kind of bullet point some of the points that were made and some things that we can do moving forward. And the best way to stay connected is to either like or follow the page on Facebook. Or if you'd like, you could go to faithministries.church/connect, and you can join our email list. We'll be able to just send out the future correspondence to you.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yes, but we want to thank everybody for joining us this evening. We thank you for your comments and your input. Thank you, Dr. and Dr. Wise. We appreciate you guys joining us. And until the next time, we're just going to keep
next time.
Keep pressing, keep praying, and keep pushing.
Yes, and let's not let this be the end.
There you go.
No, it has to be a continual situation.
Exactly. Let's make some change, starting with ourselves.
Yes.
Exactly.
All right. Any last words besides good night?
Let me pray. Let me close with a prayer. Can I do that? That's always been helpful, because whatever we decide to do, we're gonna need the Lord's help to do it. Our Father and our God, we thank you, first of all, for being God and for being good. We know that we're in the midst of some trying times for so many reasons. We also know that in our history, we have faced so much trauma, and yet we know that you're going to lead us and guide us. We ask that you give us direction, give us discernment, give us deliverance. Whatever needs to be done and however we need to be a part of it, let us know. We stand ready. In Jesus' name we pray, and for his sake, amen.
Amen.
And all right, we'll see you all next time. Of course, we have church this Sunday at 10 a.m., same place, and we hope to see you there.
Yes. Everybody take care. Have a great night.
Good night.